Archbishop Carlo Vigano says Francis knew about allegations of sexual abuse by American Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, but did nothing for 5 years until the Cardinal resigned last month. "I won't say a single word about this statement," he said. The Pope, though, did confirm he'd read it. It is perhaps the most public challenge to his leadership yet, and from within.
The Drew Mariani Show on Relevant Radio.
Yeah, you just heard that clip from NBC, but you can keep it here at Relevant Radio. You're going to get a balanced and insightful look at this issue as new news continues to develop, and we'll keep you up to speed on the latest. That's for sure. Feel free to join us, 888-914-9149, anytime to get in on the conversation. Fox News did kind of an in-depth look at the story. They're going to get you caught up if you're not filled in on all the details of what's currently happened. Here's their reporting on this.
Read the document carefully and judge it for yourselves. I will not say one word on this. I think the statement speaks for itself.
Aboard the papal plane on Sunday, returning from his trip to Ireland, Pope Francis neither confirmed nor denied allegations that he failed to act against a known sexual abuser. In an 11-page letter written by former Archbishop and Vatican ambassador to the U.S., Carlo Maria Vigano, Vigano claims the Pope knew about sexual abuse allegations against American Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, the former Archbishop of Washington, D.C., who resigned in July after new allegations emerged. Vigano says he told Pope Francis in June of 2013 that McCarrick had a thick dossier of sexual abuse allegations against him spanning generations. Vigano is now calling for the Pope's resignation over his inaction. Pope Francis must be the first to set a good example for cardinals and bishops who covered up McCarrick's abuses and resign along with all of them. But Vatican experts are skeptical of Vigano's claims, noting he is a known critic of Pope Francis. The Pope removed Vigano from his ambassadorship in 2016.
Ever since Saturday night, when the former Vatican ambassador to the U.S. released that 11-page testimonial, the attacks on his personal character have been unrelenting. Let's talk a little bit about this as well. I also want to talk about, whether or not the Vatican is going to be in the crosshairs of attorneys. Those who know Vigano, like Bishop Olmsted of Phoenix, they said he's a man of integrity, he's a man who loves Christ, and a man who loves his church. But others are saying, hey, he's got an agenda. He's gunning for something. He's gunning for higher office, and that's just mad. You know, it's just crazy. He's just I think against some people are saying, look, he's a conservative with an axe to grind. I think, to be fair, there are some aspects of his letter that do sound to me, from what I've read, just a little conspiratorial. I'm not going to make any judgment here. I'm going to see what our bishops have to say. And we'll see how all this shakes out. You know, none of the objections so far have answered his central point, that Pope Francis knew of the charges against Cardinal McCarrick and that he knew Pope Benedict had placed these restrictions on McCarrick. But Pope Francis actually dropped those restrictions and made McCarrick a close consultant on all things related to the church here in the United States. There's one thing, however. Archbishop Vigano's critics, they're saying that they're saying that that basically quashed an investigation into the then Archbishop John Nienstedt's allegations of sexual misconduct. And the former Archbishop of St. Paul in Minneapolis came under fire for handling his, the sexual abuse issue that they were dealing with as well. It was tough. I don't know if you're familiar with that story. He led a campaign against legalizing same-sex marriage in that state. And then allegations were made that he had inappropriately touched a boy during a confirmation photo, and then more allegations came out that he pressured a seminarian into having sex with him. And this is the distortion, the confusion of all this stuff. I don't even like to talk about it. So to answer these, a law firm was hired to investigate him. It turns out that firm had been part of a coalition of firms pushing to redefine marriage in Minnesota. So Archbishop, Vigano, who was a nuncio at the time, was being kept abreast of those developments, and the claim was made that he ordered the investigation to be ended. So yesterday, Vigano released documents giving his side of the story, and I'm joined today for analysis on it by Dan Cheely. He's a former trial lawyer, educated at Princeton and Harvard Law. And was the founder of the Harvard Law Students for Life back in '73, the year that Roe v. Wade became law. And he's been a great contributor here to our network. I know many of you have the great pleasure of hearing the Dan Cheely Show on the weekends. And he's here today just to give us some insight. Dan, welcome back. Good to have you on the air.
It's always an honor to be with you, Drew.
Wow, so much to talk about. I don't even know really where to start. First, let's a couple things. And then I want to get to, because I saw an email from you where you've got 7 new points now, 6 things that are important to a trial lawyer. And I want to look at this through your eyes. But first, tell me about the documents that Archbishop Vigano released yesterday.
Well, this is, as a trial lawyer looking at analysis of evidence, this was something that was almost a tour de force on Vigano's part. Okay. It was almost like getting set up, like he was setting up someone to make an objection that he could just quash and stuff. Okay, here's what happened. They republished a New York Times story from 2016 saying that when the Nienstedt investigation began, Vigano tried to quash it. He said, "Don't you dare!" In effect, "Don't you dare keep this thing going. Stop it." Okay, and so that's pretty powerful stuff. Because somebody says, "Hey, you're talking about the Pope not acting on information." Well, you didn't act on information, but he immediately, within 24 hours, came back with documentation showing a number of showed essentially to me as a trial lawyer 7 different things. First of all, he wrote back. What had happened was his advice to that commission, to those the people that were investigating this was, "Hey, wait a minute. Before you go any further, we have to hear Archbishop Nienstedt's side of the story. Before you start writing to Rome, before you do anything, we got to get a complete dossier here. And to do that, we must hear what Vigano what Nienstedt has to say." Now, that's not anything controversial. That's not quashing an investigation. That goes back to the Middle Ages. The common law always says you have to hear 2 sides of a story before you proceed. In fact, it goes even earlier than that. Roman law required that the accused have an opportunity to state his case. That's just making a good investigation. So immediately in 2014, Vigano wrote to the bishops that had composed the original report and said, "Hey, you have to correct this record. I did not say the investigation should be quashed. Okay, I said we got to make sure that Nienstedt's side of the story is heard before we go running off to Rome with an incomplete story." Now, as a trial lawyer, to me, 7 things came about of the documents that he had. This was not just Vigano's word against someone else's word. He's got the letters. He's got the documentation. And here's what it shows me. Number 1, Archbishop Vigano is completely innocent of the false charges now being made concerning the St. Paul investigation of 2014. Number 2, Vigano attempted to clear up the incorrect reporting in 2014, contemporaneously and immediately at the time of the misunderstanding, at the time of the events, long before any news story. Number 3, he's got written documentation of both of the above dated in 2014. And he continued in 2014 with the investigation and went on to Rome with his approval, which ultimately resulted in the removal of Nienstedt. So, he didn't stop the investigation. He stamped it. He said approved. Okay. Now, the Vatican, on the other hand, at point 4, with speed totally uncharacteristic of its history in connection with reports of this kind of a possible official misbehavior, when the New York Times story surfaced in 2016, immediately that day ordered an investigation of Vigano and his role on this. 2 years later, when they already had the documentation in their files. Now, an investigation took place. That investigation, point 5, was unable to find any misconduct at Archbishop Vigano's part, and indeed discovered the careful contemporaneous 2014 information, which vindicated Vigano, and no Vatican action of any kind could be taken or was taken against Archbishop Vigano. And the Vatican even had an American lawyer named Lena look at the record ahead of time, and, nothing further happened to Vigano. Now, despite number 6, despite this, and despite 2 documented requests from Archbishop Vigano to clear his name on the record, going all the way back to 2016, the Vatican did absolutely nothing to do so, despite the fact that they had the possession of the exculpatory evidence in their own files. Now, here's the final thing, which is point 7. Let's say that the story is true, okay? The New York Times story, that the original version, for the sake of argument, let's say, was true. But then, according to the zero tolerance logic that Pope Francis says the Vatican should exhibit in these things, they should have further disciplined Vigano. And effectively, the Vatican then can be held responsible, if not for not disciplining further, or for reinstating McCarrick when they, if they had information that he was indeed a predator. But then if they could also, assuming that Vigano's lying through his teeth up and down the line, well, the Vatican can still be held responsible for not disciplining Vigano. So this is something that, if you bring it forward, okay, the Muhammad Ali used to have a term for something like this. It's called roping your opponent. He had a more colorful term, okay? But, this is, they end up, by virtue of the facts that are out there, being caught either way. Either way, they delayed, they did not do what they said they're supposed to do, which is have zero tolerance for accusations involving cover-up or sexual predation. And the bottom line of this is, and this is what was so breathtaking in a way, impressive from a lawyer's standpoint, Archbishop Vigano is stronger, was stronger yesterday in establishing his credibility than he was the day before. The accusations made against him have served to buttress and underline his own integrity and credibility. And there's a final point. I mean, unfortunately, his being able to basically throw the accusations back them, because he had a loaded gun that they didn't know he had. They've also shown an apparent pattern of partisanship, adversarial behavior, an inconsistent application of standards, to put it mildly, in the current administration in the Vatican. This all serves to buttress the credibility of the original affidavit of Archbishop Vigano, and he would probably people would say that he's not the only person in the hierarchy under the current administration to experience the effects of this kind of inconsistency. So I really think that justice, as well as charity, it requires on our part that we inform our listeners of this important clarification on the part of Archbishop Vigano, because it's not being covered in the press. The only thing that they print this accusation, they say, for example, Drew Mariani is an adulterer, and you show the proof that you're not, and they never print the refutation.
Wow.
No, that's damage to a good name. It's basic Catholic doctrine. The Archbishop Vigano does have a right to his good name, especially as I believe he's risked it for the good of the church.
Yeah. Let me follow up on a point you made. Point 7 that you made. You said, hey, the Vatican has a zero, tolerance policy. And if that was the case, then Vigano should have been disciplined. Now the Vatican, you say, could be held accountable. Who's going to hold them accountable? What kind of liability does the Vatican have?
From a legal standpoint,
from a legal standpoint.
That's a very it's going to be a very litigated question. Unfortunately, the way the law is set up, the litigation ends at the diocese level. Okay, the bishops are not errand boys of the Pope. I mean, they are independent corporate entities in their own right. So it doesn't, and that, the legal ramifications are going to stop there. Now, there are going to be arguments made, against it, I'm sure. And but technically, the way the law stands now, it ends at the archdiocesan level.
My guest today is Attorney Dan Cheatley. If you want to join us, I'm going to open the phones toll free for you. I only have a few moments in our segment here.
Yeah, one last thing I want to say is what I would, if I had to pick, if I was a lawyer and I was presenting these cases, I would much rather take Vigano's case than I would the Pope's case. And I thought a lot about it. What would I tell the Vatican if, say, this were an American lawsuit and I were their lawyer, and an honest lawyer, which I was and which I tried to be and I am? What would I tell the Vatican how to respond?
All right, I'll tell you, Dan,
hold that
thought. Hold that thought. Give that answer when we return, okay? It's about 12 minutes before the top of the hour. Take a short pause. You can get into, we have only a few minutes, 888-914-9149. If you want to join the conversation, ask a question, sound off. That's your hotline. We'll be right back. All right, it's about 8 minutes before the top of the hour. We will pray the Chaplet of Divine Mercy, so feel free to join us. If you're on hold and you want to speak to my guest today, Dan Cheely, we'll grab your calls here. The number for both are 888-914-9149. If you're just joining us, Dan Cheely, of course, is one of our colleagues here at Relevant Radio. He hosts a show every Sunday, The Dan Cheely Show, and you can check him out at 2 o'clock Central, that's 3 Eastern, and noon Pacific. He's a very gifted attorney, Princeton and Harvard educated, and is here just to give us kind of a legal analysis of what might face the church in the not-too-distant future. And when we left off, Dan, you posed a question. You said, if I was to give the Vatican advice, this is what I'd say. What advice would you give the Vatican?
Well, analogizing this, if this were an American lawsuit, okay, American jury trial, and we have the facts as they are right now, the evidence as it is right now, I would tell my client, the Pope, okay, Your Holiness, if you've got information here, you better show it to me. You better pony it up now. I mean, he's made some very specific allegations, and he's got documentary proof behind a lot of it. Now, he also, if you've got, as an honest lawyer, I'd say if you've got proof, you better show it. If you don't have that kind of proof to refute his allegations, not just calling him names, not just trying to point out something that it turns out it strengthens him rather than it weakens him. If you don't have those allegations, you better cut the best deal you can and get out of this lawsuit. You better settle the case. And I've told people that. Now, a dishonest lawyer, of course, can tell other things. Say, here's how you lie. Here's how you bury evidence. Here's how you manufacture stuff. Okay, but that is something that, of course, that nobody wants anyone to advise the Pope about things like that, or nor would the Pope want to hear things like that, right. Being a man of God. So basically, if he's got proof that refutes Vigano, then he better bring that forward, or he better make a clean breast of things and come to a conclusion of this.
Yeah, and I'm going to grab calls for, but I'm just curious here. Do you think that United States attorneys general are going to sue the Vatican? They're going to come after the Vatican directly? Are they liable? Because I was thinking about this. Some people say yes, the Vatican's in for a lot of trouble. But what about diplomatic immunity? What kind of protections does the Vatican have?
Well, you see, when you have there's an old adage in the law: bad injuries make bad law. When you have a very egregious situation, like unfortunately this situation with the tremendous abuse that went on, the violations of all kinds of law, and not just abuse of children, but also of sexual harassment. Okay, is going on, and the facts are there. When you've got egregious things about this, people will change the law just out of anger, and penalize you worse, okay, than you would be if a dispassionate analysis were being undertaken. Mm-hmm. And so they have already tried many, not just, you don't have to worry about attorneys general, right, although that's going to happen too. Plaintiffs' attorneys have already tried to reach the Vatican, with these lawsuits. They have not been successful so far. Right. Given again the now fervid mentality that's going on, right, and given the fact that there are 51 different jurisdictions in the United States, I think it's eventually one of those is going to say, yeah, go after the you can go after the Vatican. Okay, right. And arguments can be made, and I know how to make them on both sides. Right. But eventually now a lot of protections to the church are going to be lost, unfortunately.
All right, Dan, let's do this. Grab a couple quick calls as time will evaporate. Kathleen's listening in Helena, Montana. Hi, Kathleen. Good afternoon.
Hi, and thank you for taking my call. This morning I listened to a video that Taylor Marshall had done entitled, Why Did Pope Benedict Resign, McCarrick, Vigano, and the Vatican Bank, and actually kind of relates all of this all the way back to the apparently for Pope Benedict. Vigano did the report and found the Vatican Bank issues and brought that forward, and underlying that there was also sex abuse scandal going on that is related to the Vatican Bank scandal. And he brings up some very, very interesting points, but I'm just kind of wondering, have you thought about things going back that far and all being part of it? I mean, Pope Benedict at that time was he trusted Vigano and actually had assigned him other assignments because he knew he could trust him.
All right, Kathleen, great question. Dr. Marshall, I'm sure you're familiar with Dan. He released that a little while ago. Your thoughts? I mean, I don't want to speculate as to why Pope Benedict resigned, I don't think he would do it in light of those events, but your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I'm glad that this nice lady made the point. I wasn't going to bring this up because I was only going to bring up the points that are involved in Vigano's refutation of the accusations against him. But it is indeed a fact that Vigano, in one of his previous jobs as governor of Vatican City, discovered all sorts of what we would call here in Chicago graft, and not only honest graft, dishonest graft that was going on with the people providing services to the Vatican. He squelched a lot of that, fired a number of people, and of course created a lot of enemies. If you're an honest cop and you go to the authorities about the dishonest cops in your precinct, they're going to want to get you out of there pronto. So Vigano has already proven his integrity in a very difficult situation that a lot of people didn't want to trust, didn't want to touch. And so Pope Benedict, despite the fact that people were saying, well, gee, basically Vigano is out of control, he doesn't know what he's talking about, he's going too far, he did assign him to this very sensitive and important assignment, the United States nunciature. And so I think it says a lot for the respect that he's been held in the church in the past.
Well, Dan, thanks for your analysis and insight today. It's always good to talk with you. Just final thoughts. I have probably about 30 seconds for you.
Well, I mean, this is a very serious time in the church. This is indeed a historic time. I mean, we're living through it. And I think what we need to do, and this is coming across everywhere, we all need to be as good and as truly Catholic as we possibly can be, because we have to be the ones to rebuild the church, and we should do it based on what's been handed down to us from the apostles and no watered-down version at all.
You got it, Dan. Thank you. We'll look forward to tuning in 2 p.m. Sunday to the Dan Teely Show, and we'll have you back again. That's Dan Cheely. Did I just call him Teely? Dan Cheely. Dan, thanks. We're going to pray the chaplet when I return. Stay with me. Stay with me. Stay with me.